Hello, my name is Katherine McClelland. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I came to be a fiber artist and what that means to me. Do you remember the first day of first grade and they sit you down with a fresh piece of paper, a box of crayons, and ask you what you want to be when you grow up? It's a bit silly if you think about it, but we ask this of children all the time. But there I was, my 6-year-old self, and I knew I was going to be an artist. I arrived at Maryland Institute College of Art thinking I was going to be a photography major. My freshman photography professor soon set me straight about that delusion. I found that I reveled in a more physical process anyways and teetered between becoming a fibers or ceramics major. But those fiber people were just a little bit too crazy for me, so I graduated as a ceramics major and headed off to become an art star. Life, as it often does, had other plans. I got married to the fabulous boy I met senior year, a GFA major, had kids, became a special educator, teaching in a variety of schools and roles, none of them art. In 2016, after 15 plus years of teaching and a master's of education, I realized I was not where I was supposed to be. My 6-year-old self was glaring at me. I had dabbled over the years here and there with different creative endeavors, with clay or sewing or other things. However, this painting for me marks a point where I started my way back to my art. I dug out some acrylics and painted portraits of my girls. This one is of my younger daughter, Kinsey, done in 2012. But it didn't feel comfortable for me. By 2015, I had started to develop a style I liked, working on white paper, focusing on just the subject, and incorporating patterned paper into the images. My paintings were always of kids, mine, my nieces, nephews. I wanted to celebrate the joy of play. These pieces still felt like exercises, though. I enjoyed making them, but felt something was missing. In January of 2015, I discovered felting. And by January of 2016, I had realized I could use felting to create 2D images. This piece, Joy, was my first 2D piece. I had played around with 3D and even a mix of 2D and 3D, but this piece was different. Things clicked into place, and I knew I had found an avenue worth pursuing. At first, my pieces were just an extension of what I had been exploring with my paintings. I focused on needle felting, using a wet felted base as a canvas. Children were still my main subject. In this series, called Serious Play, each child is engaged in their own world. Each piece is about poster-sized, not life-sized, but definitely larger than I was used to working. By 2017, I was starting to work larger and add more detail to my pieces. This work, Tag Your It, is 32 by 53 inches. I'm beginning to explore a more decorative style and learning to include image making in the wet felting stage of the process. This is also one of the first pieces where I was combining references to create a new visual rather than working from a single reference. In 2016, our world was turned upside down, and I felt the need to speak out. With this piece, Speak Truth. I was honored to have it included in the show Threads of Resistance, in which traveled around the country for a year and a half. This experience gave me the confidence to start applying to more shows, and my art began to reflect my need to say more with what I was doing. An example of this, and how I often use art as an outlet to express emotions, can be seen in this piece, Wishful Thinking. I was working through feelings of helplessness and anger at losing yet another student. Each of the guns beneath my feet represent a student I've lost to gun violence. I chose the aesthetic of propaganda posters as a nod to the power of visual messages. I often create images that reflect issues relating to being a woman. This piece, Not So Zen, considers all the roles women are asked to fill. I have quite a few self-portraits, because I'm a cheap model, but also a lot of what I'm reacting to is my own experiences. This image is made with alpaca fleeces I processed myself, and it's one of the first pieces I used top stitching on. This piece, Thank You, is the largest piece I've made yet, at 41 by 54 inches. I wanted to create images that looked at relationships, that explored balance rather than the stereotypical male-dominated poses of lovers that pervade classical art. Creating this work was a long physical process involving a lot of different techniques. I want to talk process for a minute. After all, the making of these pieces is a big part of why I work with felt as a medium. After I've sketched out a piece, I begin to build the image using wool on top of a loosely machine felted material called pre-felt. I use felting needles, which are barbed, to tangle the fibers as I poke. This keeps the fibers in place until I'm ready to wet felt the image. I then move on to the wet felting stage. For this piece, that meant a 12-hour day with 8 hours of active felting. This part of the process is ancient, and there is a unique satisfaction to participating in a craft that has existed for thousands of years. It involves water, soap, and a whole lot of muscle power. By the end of this stage, the fibers merge together to become a solid piece of felt. To complete the image, I will often go back into it with needles, adding and tweaking here and there. I also sometimes add top stitching to the piece. This one was so large I needed to seek help, and luckily a local quilt artist, Tim Natara, let me barter for some time on her long arm. I'm forever adding to my toolbox and have recently even begun to dye my own fibers, furthering me along the road of crazy fiber lady. My husband is a large part of my creative process. He's a cabinet maker, an artist, and a much-needed critic and sounding board for myself. Recently, we've been collaborating on a series where I am reframing the stories of women who have been demonized. I create the image with felt, and Ryan creates the frame to match the theme of the story being told. Lilith and Eve was the first of the series. Many know the story of Eve, but Lilith was the first wife of Adam who refused to be subservient and as a result left Eden and became the mother of all demons. I gave Lilith the role of mentor to Eve. She shares the knowledge with her. I wanted to show the birth of women as being one of support rather than shame. Medusa is a familiar name from Greek mythology, but her origin myth is perhaps less well known. Athena turned her into a gorgon for daring to be raped in her temple. I ask, what if Athena had defended her? In the image, we see Athena in a defensive pose, with Poseidon reflecting in the shield where Medusa is traditionally shown, as he is the monster in this narrative. I am currently working on the third piece in this series, Jezebel and Astarte. I have spent months researching and sketching and have just begun to build the image in wool. The common narrative paints Jezebel as a whore. I want to show her as the queen she was and return her goddess to her. It feels appropriate to be working on these stories in a medium that is both ancient and contemporary. I found that felting fits my needs in a way other mediums have not. It's at once sculptural and painterly. It fits into the world of textiles, which in our culture is often the domain of women. It feels right to be creating a new narrative in a discipline that women have used for generations to speak out in a world that would prefer their silence.